It is a challenging time, and it will remain a challenging time for every aspect of the semi industry for at least a year and a half yet.
That was Intel CEO Pat Gelsinger with us yesterday talking about the chip shortage as the auto industry continues to slash production outlooks. For more, let's bring in former Cypress Semi CEO TJ Rogers. TJ, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you.
In terms of these semi shortages, I mean, we know they continue to roil the auto industry. We've gotten reports that they're starting to affect other industries as well. What is your outlook? Do you anticipate that this is a situation that could truly stretch into, say, 2023?
The answer is definitive yes and no. You know what you just heard from Intel is for the really high-end chips. So we're talking about chips that 12 nanometers in dimension for a transistor and below. The fact is, by the end of this year, the rest of the industry will be recovered, and for chips made on 200 millimeter or 8-inch wafers. At nodes at 40 nanometers and above, which is almost everything we use, we're going to be back to normal. The car industry is getting hit for two reasons. One is they use high-end chips like Intel makes, and two is their procurement practices set them up for this. The exception being Toyota, and I think the triggering mechanism for this interview is Toyota announced that they're going to come up short a couple 100,000 cars. The reason being that in the dashboard of modern cars, you have a little movie theater. And all those dials that used to be there aren't there anymore. They're pictures. And the chips that paint that dashboard and control the car are high-tech chips of the same type that Intel makes. Intel, I don't believe, makes many automotive chips at all. And those chips are expected to be scarce through the first half of 2022. So the yes is some automotive manufacturers are going to be affected through, I think, the middle of 2022. Intel is going to be affected into the beginning of 2023 because Intel has been underperforming. Mr. Gelsinger, the new president of Intel, he came in because Intel has had problems, has watched Samsung and TSMC, Asian rivals, pass them by in the really high-end chips. And yeah, they've got a headwind, their own performance. But this is going to be over by the end of this year for most stuff we buy.
So we have this conversation right now. There's a timeline in place, depending on what type of chips we're talking about, to see an easing of the shortages, whether it's this year or next. And yet we have money and policy that is being directed both here in the U.S. And elsewhere, China, of course, being another key example, towards the creation of more foundries and more capability to produce more chips in the future. What does that do to what's already a very cyclical industry?
Well, a couple questions there. Let me take the long-term questions, most important. And the fundamental argument, which the SIA talks about, is there in Washington lobbying for money, Semiconductor Industry Association. I was president of that group back when it was headquartered in Silicon Valley, and you had to be a CEO of a chip company to be on the group. Today it's in Washington, and it's a lobbying group, and they're I hate to use the word groveling for money, and give me money because we're behind. The Chinese are putting money into their chips, and we'll lose ground to them. It's the standard lobbying argument in Washington. The fact is, the Chinese semiconductor industry is not very good. And they've been throwing money at it for years. And the fact is that free and open competition, free markets, are the kind of markets that the chip industry thrives in. And government subsidies are bad for the chip industry. So I don't buy that. I don't think we ought to be giving money to some of the richest companies in the world.
So free and open markets, we have an industry that continues to consolidate and big ticket deals that are continuing to make their way through regulatory approval right now. I mean, Gelsinger, just going back to Intel, voiced his interest in acquiring something as well with us yesterday. Do you expect that we continue to see more of this type of deal making and that essentially the biggest players get bigger?
Yes, that's been the trend. You know, cars, there are 110 car companies in 1900, and now we got the big 3, 2, whatever you want to say, and 1 or 2 big companies offshore. So that's happening in the chip industry, continuing to happen. In this case, I support it. Gelsinger runs a company that is one of the best managed companies in the world, and he's recovering some of the management skills they lost, and they're going to take over. They're talking about taking over Global Foundries. That is not a well-run organization, and when they get that capacity, they'll have instant capacity online, well-run, making the right stuff. And that's the kind of move where the semiconductor industry can fix some of its problems. They've got plenty of money to buy all the fabs they need. That's not the problem.